Welcome to the Lalo Dagach podcast. I'm Lalo Dagach, and I'm here with today's co-host is Jennifer Sutton.
Hello.
And today I'm going to be speaking with a friend of mine who I've met online, who's a very interesting person. He is president and founder of America's first secular-humanist prison outreach organization called Saved by Reason. And Josh is a reformed fundamentalist Christian, neo-Nazi skinhead, and white supremacist. He now identifies as a classical liberal and a staunch free-thinking activist, and is currently you're working on your bachelor's degree in social and behavioral sciences, and you're also writing a book on your experiences. Is that all correct, Josh?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. Well, that's a hell of a resume.
That is so cool.
But yeah, I've been talking with Joshua for a while now. Joshua Turner, you've also worked in your outreach program along Peter Boghossian.
Yeah, actually, Peter's a part of my board. He's part of my board of advisors. He's the senior advisor, and I actually got this idea for Say by Reason from him because he wrote his college dissertation on his experiences in going into jails and prisons and teaching the Socratic method to inmates, and watching their critical thinking and their moral reasoning skills get better. And so I was like, wow, I want to do this. I was in jail and prison, and this kind of thinking helped me, and I know it can help other people. So,
well, I mean, there's so much to go over, but I really think that for my podcast right now, you're one of the best people to talk to, considering the atmosphere in the United States right now with Black Lives Matter, the racial tensions, Trump, everything else. Race has exploded into a much bigger deal in the last decade. So for your story, we really have to start from the beginning. So can you tell us about your upbringing and where you're from?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was born in Los Angeles, raised by my mom and my stepfather, and my mom had a really tough upbringing. So when she turned 17 years old, she met some Christians, and at the time, the church Calvary Chapel, which is like a Pentecostal light church, they were doing this Jesus freak movement, and they had a guy named Chuck Smith who would hit the beach in his flip-flops, and he was like a cool surfer with long hair. And it was like late 70s, early 80s. And, this was the beginning of what they called the Jesus freak movement. And he was like the first cool, like hippie Christian, And so my mom she met some guys that were in this movement. She lived close by Chuck Smith's church. So she really got swept up into this movement. And I really think it's because of her upbringing. She grew up in really poor neighborhoods and was just exposed to a lot of things she shouldn't have been exposed to. I don't want to go into too much detail, but so she just went full bore into Christianity, and so I was raised in a very strict Christian atmosphere. My mom, I was told everything from that there was demons in my room when I was like 5 years old, demons in my room and angels, fighting over my spirit in my room. So
is this what she would tell you?
Yeah, she would tell me this, she'd tell me that's why I needed to pray every night, that God would protect me and send extra angels basically to fight the demons that were trying to come after me. So of course I grew up having nightmares all the time that there was demons in my room and stuff like that.
Did you believe this yourself when at the time?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously now reflecting, I know that they were dreams, but I could have swore that I had some real experiences with demons being in my bedroom.
What do they call that when you have those they're not night terrors, but when you actually have those hallucinations where you actually see, I know there's a name for it, where you're
I'm not sure, but I suffer from PTSD now, and it's not just from that. I've had a lot more experiences that I'll talk about later that impacted that. But that is obviously probably what started, my PTSD issues.
I'm kind of curious when you believe in those kind of things, and you're told that by your parents at that age, does it manifest into actual like memories in your head of that actually happening?
That's what I mean. Like I have a couple of memories of. I have one specific memory of me getting up to go to the restroom, and when I came back in the room, when I opened the door, there was a demon walking, like pacing in my room, and he was like looking at my brother who slept on the bottom bunk, and I slept on the top, and he was just like looking at my brother and pacing back and forth. So now, I mean, I know it was a dream, but back when I was, 5 years old, I was convinced for years that it really had happened.
Do you think it was a dream or do you think it was like a waking hallucination? Because I have the same kind of memories or something. Like I have a distinct memory of a demon looking at me through a glass window of our addition in the back of the house, and I didn't dream it, but it was like a waking. I don't know. Maybe it was definitely because of the religious upbringing. But do you think it was a dream or do you think it was like a wake hallucination?
It
Do you
it
know?
probably yeah, I don't honestly don't really know. I mean, it was so long ago now, but it could have very well been a waking hallucination. It probably was what it was because even now I remember it just felt so real.
What I find interesting is like in retrospect, even in my childhood, I remember, when you're very little and you're kind of afraid of the dark and you see, shapes in the dark, or you feel like you're seeing something in a window or something's under your bed. But I guess because of my background, that I was never brought up with any kind of religiosity, and
Right.
like I would see those kind of things, but in immediately after, a second later, I'd be like, okay, but those things don't exist, right? And I can rationalize out of it because
Right.
because how I was brought up. But I guess it's when you're brought up in a different way that same fear that a child has of the dark and those images you see, you don't have that kind of immediate after rational thought, right? You're actually told
Right.
like, no, 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 those are really there. So I guess the memory that retains after that is very different.
So you've never thrown
Exactly.
up from being so terrified of like Satan?
What, me? No. Or Joshua.
You've really missed out on that experience, Lalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. If
Yeah.
you if you really wanted to, you can just take acid or something, and you could experience all that shit I experienced when I was a kid.
Bad trip.
May I'll do a trip to Peru and do ayahuasca or something. But
Yeah, it was like a bad acid trip. But no, seriously, I mean, you had logic to prevent you from going down all types of rabbit holes that I
right.
went down because I wasn't taught logic, So
So
and
what
that's
can
why
you I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's why I think I was so susceptible to becoming influenced to become a skinhead later on in my life, and all these other things I got into was because I wasn't taught as a kid how to think logically.
What else I mean, what other things that happened while you were growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in this really strict atmosphere. I was told crazy things from the demons all the way to being told that the government was going to be kicking down our door anytime soon and making us take a mark so that we could basically buy, sell, or trade things. It was going to be the new credit card. Because in Revelations it talks about the mark of the beast, and nobody can buy, sell, or trade anything unless they have this mark. Well, my parents were being told by the pastors that there's going to be this microchip coming out in the future that is going to replace credit cards, and it's basically going to be a way to scan and keep track of all your bank account information, all your money by just scanning this card under your skin or your forehead.
I have evangelical cousins who still talk about that. Yeah, in relation to like the end of days and the antichrist coming, and they said there's certain signs, and one of them is that microchip thing. Yeah, they've told me
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, imagine telling an 8-year-old kid that the government that this is going to be happening like tomorrow or here within the next year, and that the government would kick down your doors and break it would hold my little brother and I down and our fingers bust our fingers off and our toes off, torturing us in front of my parents to try to get them to take the mark, and then eventually they'd behead us if we didn't take it. And my parents said we
Whoa.
couldn't. My parents said we could not absolutely, if no matter what, no matter how much torture, we couldn't take it because if we had the mark, that means you were forever damned to hell and you could never go to heaven.
You're 8 years old when this is happening,
I'm 8. My little brother's 6.
and he's hearing this as well.
Yeah, and we're both crying. I remember crying and staying up very late that night praying, and all of us were crying. And like, I mean, it was serious and it was scary. And I mean, I felt like I was living in Nazi Germany or something. It was just insane.
Until what age did this continue?
Well, this continued. I remember the year when the year 2000 came, the whole Y2K thing. I remember my dad sitting me down, probably December of '99, sitting me and my brother down individually and just having this really serious talk about how, um, he had heard the pastor Chuck Smith talking about there was a prophecy in the Bible saying that, that's there's some code in the Bible saying that when the year 2000 hits, Christians aren't going to be here. The rapture was going to happen, and he was explaining the rapture to my brother and I. And I just remember when the year 2000 did come along, I just remember that being like the first time I was starting to doubt my parents' faith because we didn't get raptured. There was nothing happened.
Did you
And here
really
it is.
genuinely believe in the rapture?
Oh yeah, I even did after that. I thought, okay, well maybe they were wrong, and my dad said, no, it actually means 2002. They were made a mistake, and so I remember, thinking for another 2 years it was going to happen, and my dad and my mom, my stepdad, excuse me, and my mom are still in that frame of mind, even
Wow.
after it passing so many times, and they're still waiting for it. But yeah, so I was told all this stuff, and at the same time, my stepdad was extremely right wing. He listened to Rush Limbaugh, so I was all, and he listened to it in the radio all the time. Whenever we get in the car to go to school or something, he'd be listening to Rush or what's that other guy, Savage Nation. So I was always hearing about how the immigrants were destroying the country, and liberal intellectual thinking is a bad thing, and it's destroying basically the Protestant you know, frame of mind, the great Protestant way of life that brought us America and American values.
Did this also go along with a lot of like racial ideas?
I can't really say that, there was that many racial ideas. My stepdad was half Mexican, but
Mm.
oddly enough, his dad, who married the my full-blooded Mexican grandmother, he's Irish, and he was very racist. He would say, I'd hear the N-word all the time from him. He would talk about the Jews, running the media and everything. So I did hear a lot of racist tones and all that kind of stuff from him. But as far as my parents were concerned, we were all people at one time until the Tower of Babel happened. Then God separated everybody by language and race. But ultimately, they believe we were all God's children, and there was not very much racial talk at home.
And were you like also like a firm believing Christian, like even
Oh
into your
yeah,
teenage years?
yeah, I was. My grandfather was actually an atheist. He wasn't the kind of atheist that got there by logic. He got there because he really despised religion, particularly Christianity, possibly because of his own personal experiences. I don't know, and I never asked him, but he was a really angry atheist, didn't like religion, but he would always show me documentaries about how we came from apes, and he would. So I would learn about evolution at an early age, but my parents told me that was wrong and that was evil. So I kind of struggled with that, and I was actually, there was for the most part I was Christian and I believed it, but there was times when I would ask questions in Sunday school that got me in trouble because I just kept pestering the teacher, because I did have questions and I did have doubts, and I'd have to say because probably my grandpa planted those seeds.
So at what point did you fall into Nazism?
Well, that didn't really come till prison, but I grew up after I was born in LA. I lived there for about 7 or 8 years, and then the riots were happening, so we moved up here to Paradise, where I live now, and it's a town. It's 91% white, and the culture here not everyone is racist, but there's just a really racist culture here. There's a lot of bikers, you know, just people are really right wing here. The county is a red county, so there's just a lot of racism here. I remember seeing swastikas drawn on my friends' desks, like there's swastikas and stuff. And I remember like the coolest guy in my school that all the girls liked, and all the guys wanted to be like. He was a skinhead. So
Really? Wow.
yeah, he was. Yeah, he got a tattoo when he was 16 of a swastika. So I mean,
What year is this that you're in high school?
this is like '98. This is the late '90s. This is when like the movie American History X came out.
Right. How old are you now?
I'm like 16. Oh, how now I'm
Yeah.
32.
Now you're 32. Yeah, I know.
We're talking to a kid.
No, so at that time you're like 16, but now you're 32.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm 32. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So so it was like just ingrained in the culture where I grew up. But there wasn't like active, real political skinheads. There wasn't like a organization like Hammer Skins or anything like that where I lived. It was just like, redneck, hillbilly type, racism. But the guy that was a skinhead was just like a self-proclaimed skinhead. I think because the American History X had come out at that time, so he was just trying to be something that he thought he was, but he wasn't really a part of some organization or anything. You know what I mean?
I've heard you talk about American History X before.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that you mention it during those days as something that people were trying to copy because it kind of gave enthusiasm to be a skinhead, which I thought was interesting because it's an anti-skinhead movie.
Right. But they don't make skinhead movies. I mean, there's another movie called Romper Stomper that is actually Russell Crowe's like first movie. It's an Australian movie and it's about skinheads. He plays a skinhead. But I mean, other than those two movies, I don't think there's very many movies about skinheads. So I guess that was just my first exposure to what skinheads were. And the way that Edward Norton played that role, I just thought he was such a badass. And I just kind of disregarded the ending, to
That's
that movie.
interesting. You can like take half the movie and make it into kind of a glorification pro-Nazi skinhead movie.
Yeah, well, when I got to prison, the skinheads that were there, they didn't like that movie. They said that movie was a Zog movie or whatever. But anyway, so growing up in this strict Christian home, not every teenager or young child lashes out in rebellion like I did, but I did. I rebelled big time, and I hung out with kids that I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with that were doing drugs and stuff. So I got into drugs at a very young age. I was smoking pot when I was like 12. Started doing the harder stuff like crank and Oxycontins and stuff when I was like 15, 16.
So are you saying that pot is a gateway drug?
No, not at all. No, it's just the first thing I was exposed to, I guess. But no, I'm not saying that at all.
This is a partnership for a drug-free America.
No, hell no. But yeah, so I got exposed to the harder stuff at like 15, 16. So I developed a drug habit at a young age, and I don't even know why I brought up the drugs. I lost my frame of thought now.
Did it influence at all? Do you think in that, or does it? Do you think that it's at all related?
Not really. I mean, I don't know. I guess I want to say not really because skinheads are not supposed to be using in their precepts. Skinheads have what's called the 88 precepts, and they're like it's like their Bible. They're the rules that skinheads have to follow. And one of them it talks about keeping your blood pure of toxins and stuff. So basically, the skinheads translate that to don't do drugs, and some of them even take it as far as don't drink. But it's ironic because most of the skinheads that I've met in prison are there because they have drug problems or drinking issues. So but I can't really say that the two correlate. I would say that I got into drugs because I was rebelling, and I just.
Yeah, but would you say initially that it led you to meeting people that
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in that way it did because everybody that I was using with, not everyone, because there were the hippie type people that weren't racist, but a lot of them were, your racist type guys and girls. So yeah, I mean, in that way it probably was. But that's why I brought up the drugs, because I started getting in trouble a lot because of drugs. I went to juvenile hall, and that's where I started getting exposed to skinheads, like real skinheads that were a part of organizations. And when I was 18. Oh, go ahead.
That's a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Do you think that putting kids in juvenile hall does more harm than good?
I personally do, and it just depends on the juvenile hall. My experience, the juvenile hall that I went to was not a good one. It was run basically like a prison. The guards would yell at you. I've been tackled by a guard because I spilled my milk, and I stood up real quick because I didn't want the milk to get on me, and I guess he must have thought I was going to fight somebody, so he just he speared me so hard it knocked my wind out of me. Didn't break any bones or nothing, but I mean, they treat you like an inmate. They treat you like you're lesser than human. So, and that's my experience. So I don't know if other juvenile halls are better about it or not, but
So
I
say, so
personally believe.
say, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say I personally believe in rehabilitation, not,
Right,
punishing
that's what I was
people,
gonna
throwing them in a
ask.
cell.
Like, so you have a child that's done something wrong, say gotten involved with drugs or something, um,
Hmm.
and you put them in juvenile hall. So you put that group of kids together that all have come from, some sort of background that's less than healthy, right? And
Hmm.
so you say you got introduced to unsavory other kids, with an unsavory background. So I don't know that it would do any good. That's why I'm asking if you thought that it was harmful because
Hmm.
you just get introduced to kids. I just think it would be more harmful.
I mean, you have the experience also of juvenile hall and prison. Would you say in general incarceration can be negative in the sense that it just you get inculcated and surrounded by people who might influence you in the wrong, like to be even worse than when you came in?
Absolutely, and and especially in California, because I know here in California, I don't know how other states' prisons are, but in California, it's run by the inmates, and the inmates separate everything by race, and that's even in the juvenile halls. The kids separate everything by race. White boys hang out with the white boys, the blacks hang out with the blacks, and so when you do that, you start to have gangs, or you start to have cliques that are racist, and that's what I was exposed to when I went to juvenile hall. I
Do
had to
you
hang out
think
with the white boys, and it was wrong for me to let a black guy reach into my cookie bag and get a cookie out because he was black. So I was, yeah, definitely started getting exposed, even though I was exposed to the swastika and the N word at home and at school. I was starting to become more exposed to more deeper ideologies that were more racist and, you know, more
do
neo-Nazi.
do you think you would have become as extreme as you were without your experience at juvenile hall, or you think with prison it would have done it for you?
No, I don't think so. Without prison, if
With
I
the
didn't go to
with
juvie but then went to prison,
Yeah.
probably not. I think juvie really set me up for the course I took in prison, because it kind of put the training wheels on for me. I was okay. This is how it goes. You hang out with the white boys. Whereas if I went into prison, blind without any experience at all, I wouldn't know how things went really, and maybe I wouldn't have went towards the skinheads right away. I'm not sure. Um, but I know that one thing that really did make the skinheads attractive was, for one, most of them were, believe it or not, Christians, but they were part of a branch or a denomination of Christianity called Christian Identity. And another thing was that they were all right wing, and so they were talking about the same things that I heard at home. That immigrants were ruining the country, and all this other stuff. So I think that was ultimately um, what led me to go down that path. That, and
You,
not being taught to use logic.
So you're saying there's like a relation there between like the social conservatism of Christianity and that kind of a race based skinhead philosophy?
Yes, at least the fundamentalist Christianity that I was exposed to as a kid. I know that there's liberal Christianity like Episcopalians, and there's other denominations that are far more liberal, and I don't want to lump them in with these other right wing categories of Christian denominations that I'm talking about. But yeah, that definitely, there's a lot of sects in America, especially, that are just really far right, and they have a lot of intersecting ideologies with neo Nazis.
So how when did you go from juvenile hall after was this after high school or were you still in high school when you get arrested and go to prison?
I just graduated high school, but I was still on juvenile probation for a burglary, and I had just turned 18, and I was on crank, and I was spun out of my mind, and I jacked a car. I used a BB gun that looked like a real 45. And somebody had pissed me off, and I was trying to find him, and I was walking around all over town, and I was tired of walking all over town, and I was, spun out of my mind. So I just stole a little BB gun from Kmart, went out in the back of Kmart into the parking lot, and it's just broad daylight, and pointed it in some woman's face and stole her car by force. And so I got 5 years for it, and that's when I went to prison. They dropped my juvenile charges, and I was an 18-year-old kid finding myself facing 5 years in prison. So I had to make a choice pretty early. I had to either run with the Woods or the Skinheads. Being a white guy, you have those two choices.
What are the woods?
The Woods are they are a big range of white guys or girls categorize Woods or make up Woods, and that can be anywhere from non-affiliated gang members, so just a regular white guy who's never been involved in any gangs or any racist ideology or anything like that, to your white supremacist or biker gangs. So you got like the Nazi lowriders or the Aryan Nations or um, you know, uh, who's those famous bikers? I can't even think of the name right now.
Hell's Angels?
Hell's Angels, yeah,
Mm.
sorry, and Mongols and all those guys. So those are all Woods. Just anybody, basically any white guy that's not a skinhead is a Wood. And then there's the Skinheads. And if I ran with the Woods, I'm from Butte County, so that would be my what they call a car. So that would be my car that I run with. Those are the guys that take care of me. Whoever's the older guy from Butte County, he's the one that is in charge of Butte County, the Butte County guys. All the guys younger than him, he takes those are he's in charge of them, and so I would have to answer to this Butte County car, and a lot of the times the guy running the car is a Butte County gangster, and these guys are just local like crank dealers that are involved in dealing drugs. So I know, okay, if I run with these guys, I'm going to end up having to deal drugs for them or hold drugs for them or something like that. And then there's the skinheads, and then I see them doing Bible study, and I see them reading books, reading philosophy. They love Nietzsche for some reason. So, and then they're talking about the same things that I heard at home. So, and they're working out and they're in good physical shape and stuff too. So that's who I went with. I was like, that's who I'm going to run with. I'm going to run with those guys.
Did you at that time, did you consider yourself when you went into prison a full-fledged skinhead, or were you not yet?
I told them that I was, but I knew that I wasn't because I was watching them and I saw how, and when I was in county jail and juvenile hall, I kind of been told by guys that knew, that had either older brothers or that had been to prison, that knew how the whole skinhead thing worked. So I knew that they had real organizations like Hammer Skins, and I knew that they didn't like that you couldn't just go to prison and say you were a skinhead, that you had to be one on the street. So I just said, I'm a skinhead, and I thought at that time I knew enough about it to get by. If they wanted to quiz me or something, I could get by on it. But I was never really, jumped in, or I was never really part of any skinhead organization on the street. So when I just decided to run with the skinheads, it was just kind of like a thing I decided to do on my own. And I kind of just had to bullshit my way through it when they asked me, where I was from and stuff. I actually just told them I was an independent skinhead, which is an independent skinhead is just a skinhead that doesn't belong to a particular organization.
Did you at that time fully believe it? Like, did you want to be a
Oh yeah.
skinhead? Like, were you like, this is awesome. I want to be part of this group, or was it more like a necessity kind of thing?
At that time, it was more of a necessity, but the more I was exposed to it, like the more that I learned about the Zionist conspiracy and all this, I really believed that I was unraveling this reality that had eluded me and my family, for as long as I was alive, and so yeah, I really believed it, and I was all about it, and I read Mein Kampf, I read every piece of literature I can get my hands on, and before I knew it, I found myself leading we called it church when we met every Monday. It wasn't real church. I mean, even though we'd sometimes do Christian identity stuff, but it was mostly just talking about, we'd write poems about Nazi ideology or whatever, and we just share it. And I'd be teaching church and telling the guys what the swastika meant and stuff like that, because I was getting so into it. And at that time, I was really intellectually curious. So unfortunately, I was reading all the wrong stuff. But yeah, I really wanted to learn, and I thought I was really on to something real. So
What is the mentality that you were in at that time? Like, what did you think about like Jews or blacks or other races?
I thought that most your typical Jew or black or Hispanic person was oblivious and just a pawn in this highly articulated conspiracy by just a few the top Zionist leaders that were manipulating our media and our banks, and that they were using non-white culture and non-white races, people, individuals, to infiltrate America and the white life and destroy it because basically whites are supposedly, I believed at this time that whites were set apart from the other races, and basically on a pedestal. We were the shepherds to the sheep, and we were supposed to be their leaders, and we were somehow just born with better genes. And the Jews knew this, and with their cunning and with their manipulative ways, they were gonna destroy us by weakening our blood, because that's where our strength came from.
You know
So
what
they
that
were
sounds
gonna
like?
ISIS.
Sorry. Yeah, well,
I
yeah.
don't know.
I mean, I'm an ex-Muslim.
Oh,
It sounds like Islam. It sounds like you just
right.
change white for Muslim, and it's the exact same story. Exposure is a big thing. The more I was exposed to anti-Jewish sentiment, the more I became anti-Jew.
Mm.
So you surround yourself with it's a groupthink. It's
Yeah,
dangerous.
it's very dangerous.
It's amazing how like these groups are. It all concentrates around like the evil Jew. It's a Zionist conspiracy in every group for some reason.
Right.
Who said it's a conspiracy?
Ooh.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun.
I'm
So,
kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I could see. I'm reading the Intercept right now. They're writing about you tomorrow.
yeah. Jerry Seinfeld is one of the ones who runs in that top Zionist conspiracy thing.
Oh yeah.
So how do you feel about, in retrospect, looking at your mentality at that time right now?
I was just a young. See, I didn't have a father at the. I mean, I had my stepdad, but he was really abusive, um, and I didn't really have a good father figure. So I was just young and full of testosterone and looking for, a dad or just somebody to look up to, and something to believe in. I don't know if you had a chance to read Sam Harris's book that he wrote. What's the last
Letter
book?
to a Christian Nation?
No,
Oh,
the last one that he just wrote.
Islam and the
Yeah,
Future of
Islam
Tolerance?
and the Future of Tolerance.
Yes, yeah, I
Who's
read it.
who's the guy that he wrote it with?
Majid Nawaz.
Yeah, Majid. Majid mentions that when he was 18, he basically had the same emotions, that this testosterone and just this feeling that you need to belong to something. As a male, you got to find an ideology to follow and to teach your family, and to lead your family with this ideology. So yeah, I guess that's what I was feeling at the time. I was becoming a man, and I was looking for meaning, and
So
this
how do
was
you
my
feel about
meaning.
it now?
But how do I feel about it now?
Mhm.
Well, obviously, I think it's ridiculous. I think that how do I feel about what the neo-Nazism?
I mean, do you feel like sad or angry at yourself in retrospect,
Oh,
or you just feel like kind of like, how could I have fallen into that? Like, how do you look back on that old self of yours?
I'm embarrassed, honestly. I'm embarrassed to say that was me. I mean, the last year or two is really the first time in my life that I've talked about my past and being a neo-Nazi. It's not something I like to admit because I'm so ashamed of it. Just to look back and I think that I could have believed those things and I mean I've even done things for the skinheads. I've hurt people that I didn't want to hurt because I had to put in work because I was the youngster. So I'm ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed. I'm not proud of the person that I was.
So, until what point were you a skinhead all throughout prison until you left?
Yeah, and when I got out on the street, I was still a skinhead for another 2 or 3 years.
Did you run with a group outside of prison?
No, I wanted to find some youngsters and kind of start my own little group, but I was just my drug problem was bad, and that became more of a priority. So the guys that I was running with were just drug guys, guys that I can get drugs from, and not a lot of them were skinheads. So I didn't really get to do what I wanted to do, but my plan was to get out and to start my own thing and to be like a really good skinhead. That's what I wanted to do, and kind of be like this shining light, this beacon of neo-Nazism,
You
in the town
dedicated.
that I grew up with. But no, I didn't do it. My drug problem took over, and so I found myself in rehab. I didn't have any money at the time, so the only option I had was to go to a mission, a homeless mission, where they had a 12-month drug program, and I went and joined that thing, and I was just broken, and I knew that I needed to try something else, and I needed to really just reflect on my life and start making different choices. So I started reading a lot and exposed myself to a lot of different philosophies and different religions, and just trying to find my path and just trying to find the truth. And that's when I was exposed to new atheism.
Before we get to that, I kind of want to
Sure.
ask you the term that's thrown around a lot lately, more than any other one in terms of like race relations in the U.S., is white supremacy. It's used so loosely along with racist now that it's almost it becomes kind of a little bit of a meme and a joke and not taken very seriously.
Right.
As a person who used to actually hold that belief for real, not just the way Talib Kweli, if anybody follows him on Twitter, he throws it around like candy, like everybody's a
Yeah.
white supremacist, and it just loses all meaning. I think he even called like Majid Nawaz like associated to white supremacy and just all kind of nonsense. What do you think that word actually means? Having experience in that.
Yeah, well, white supremacy is the active belief that the white race is superior to other races, that the white race is genetic based on genetics better, is superior in every way to every other race known to man on the earth. So, I mean, that's a big difference compared to racism. That is simply, I mean, you can be black and you can be racist towards another race, but to be white supremacist is to believe that whites specifically are the superior race.
How do you mean it's different from racism? Like a lot of people would just say those are almost like synonymous. You don't think they are?
In a way, but I mean, racism is not it's not focusing on a particular race, whereas white supremacy is the active belief that what the white race is the superior race. So yeah, I mean that is a racist belief, but racism can be you can be racist, you can be black and be racist towards whites, or you know what I mean.
Oh,
So I
okay,
mean
I
it's
see what you
different.
mean.
It's
Yeah.
different in that sense.
Okay. I mean, you could also have like different kinds of supremacy for like different races.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. Um, but do you see something negative about like it being used so loosely? Because it being used so loosely, I noticed that it kind of loses all value.
It loses value, and it clouds, it's not, you just need to clarify what you're talking about, honestly. I mean, if you're trying to have this discussion intellectually, you should clarify what you're talking about.
Yeah. What worries
And
me is that there's actually people who actually hold white supremacist beliefs, like you were in,
right.
and when you're confronted with that, it's good to have a word for it. But when that word is just like thrown around for everything else,
Right.
well, then when you finally are confronted with like white supremacy, the word is not that poignant, right? It's not that shocking anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, everybody's called a white supremacist nowadays.
Right. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Well, anyone that disagrees with you, like you said, with Talib Kweli, I've been called a race traitor because I have mixed race kids.
Yeah,
Really. Yeah.
recently, right, Jen?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I was raised in the UK and the US, but I was always raised that America was a melting pot, diversity, immigrants. I never was raised with that idea. Aside from the Mormon church and my family being very, very racist and being white supremacists, but the idea at school, what America was, that's the exact opposite of what these people are.
So which one did you buy into more, Jen? Like, was it your family or the school or what you got outside of
Oh,
home?
I was so racist.
You were?
Oh yeah. Like I was sure that white people were better. I find it now. Actually, that was something I was telling Lalo I was curious about. Is it still something that you not is like fight? Maybe
Right.
when how do I put this?
Is it something that you kind of may at times subconsciously pop into your head? Some ideas of like racism or white supremacy that you have to kind of quickly like there's a click in your head and you have to think like that's bullshit, or is it a constant stream of logic and rationality? I think that's what you're kind of getting at, Jen. Is that it?
Yeah.
I think right now, as far as that, the neo-Nazi ideology and stuff, I'm over it because I wasn't very racist to begin with. Like I said, my stepdad was half Mexican, and I am even part Indonesian, which is funny. I mean, that was something that I just kind of tried to forget about when I was a skinhead. But
That's interesting.
I wasn't really, I wasn't really racist. I mean, I would say the N-word and stuff, but there was never any black kids around, and I don't know. I just wasn't a really hateful, racist kid, but it was just kind of the fad, and it was just kind of the people that I hung out believed in that, you know. So I just mouthed the words, but didn't really, believe it. And then when I got into prison, I really believed that I was finding this Zionist conspiracy. I believed in all that, but like I said, I thought that your average, non-white was just another pawn. So it wasn't really their fault. So I just wasn't a very hateful person, I guess. So, it was hard for me to stop saying the N-word, and because even now where I live, people say it all the time, like it's just another cuss word. And then I still struggle with Christianity, some concepts there, like, going to hell. Like I had a dream one time that a rock smashed me, and I knew I was going to die. And I called out to Jesus because I was afraid that I was going to go, like, I could go to hell right now if I die, And this is after being an atheist for a while, so I still kind of.
Strong.
It is. It's still there.
How long would you since how long would you say that you've been an atheist and you left behind all this ideology? How long has it been?
Oh, that's been about 6 years now. Or no, yeah, about 5, 6 years.
5 or 6. That's not that long.
As long as I have. He's a baby atheist like me.
Baby atheist, yeah. I mean, that's a few years, but that's not really that long a time.
Yeah, I remember. I think when Sam Harris came out with the moral landscape, that was around the time that I had just he was a freshly converted atheist around that time. So yeah, it was like 2010, 2011.
So can you continue in the story where you're outside of prison at this point and you're very into drugs? Yeah. Like, so where's the point that you escape this belief system that you're in?
That's when I start reading. Like I said, I was in this rehab in this program, and I was just reading a lot. And I read The God Delusion, and that really appealed to me because, like I said, my grandfather had kind of planted these seeds in me, these doubts and questions. And man, Richard just nailed all of them home with just this furiosity, and this intellectual, just poetic, way of writing that I just loved so much. And so I was immediately I was like on board this whole thing. I wanted to read more neo-atheist.
See? Conditioning.
Exactly, right. I wanted to read more new atheist stuff, so then I got Sam Harris and all those other guys, and I think it was Peter Boghossian's book that really, really did the deepest.
Which book is that?
That's a manual for creating atheists. Mm-hmm. I think that really gave me the tool set I needed to really reflect and just to really just become a critical thinker on my own and to come to my own conclusions.
So that book, for example, is written for an atheist and how to talk with religious people. Did you read it in the sense that you're that religious person being talked to?
At that time, I had already, when I had read that, I was pretty much swayed by the arguments, and I was, I was kind of convinced that I was an atheist at this point, and that that my skinhead beliefs were probably definitely going to need to be reflected on, but were probably wrong. So by the time I had read Boghossian's book, I was reading it as an atheist more, and I was learning a tool set to use, because that's what Dawkins and the other books lacked was. They gave you the answers, but they didn't really give you a tool set to use so you can get there on your own. So you can, be a good critical thinker on your own. So,
okay. I see the difference you're getting at. It's like a system to use to kind of get there on your own.
Exactly.
Versus just like kind of philosophically kind of going through topic by topic.
Okay,
Exactly.
so speaking of that, do you find that you have a good response to teaching inmates the Socratic method?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only does my experience help, but I mean the fact that I've totally changed, turned my life around and changed, and I can be an example for those guys. And I know that those guys all want the same things that I have. I know that, I mean, because I wanted those things when I was in jail. I wanted to be free of my addiction and to have, a family or to have people that loved me around me, friends and stuff like that, good people I can trust, and to be successful and to have respect, and just all that. So,
Well, before you get into I want to get more into the like foundation that you started, right? You're the founder.
I got the idea when I was reading his book, and
Yeah. Well, before we get to that,
sure.
I also want to ask you: do you know? Can you think of like specific points that hit you, that converted you specifically, that while you were reading?
Yeah, as far as Christianity, I think the biggest ones were just exposing the way that they exposed the Bible contradicting itself, and learning the history about how the Bible was formed and all that. I mean, just learning that was really the nail in the final nail in the coffin for Christianity for me. I didn't realize. I mean, I guess I kind of just thought that the Bible fell from heaven, and I didn't really realize that it was put together 400 years after Jesus had died, and it was written by people that didn't even know Jesus, and they were stories that were passed down by word of mouth. So just reading those things that they were telling me or writing about Christianity, that really hit home for me. As far as the neo-Nazi thing, um, I don't remember them specifically writing anything about that. I just knew that I just had this new tool set, this, the rationality and logic and proportioning my beliefs to the evidence. So those things are really what led me away from neo-Nazism.
So it wasn't so much the an escape from racism. It was more an escape from like religion, from with
Yeah,
these books.
right, right. And so after I had escaped from religion by using logic and proportioning my beliefs to the evidence, and I took those tools and then I used them in other parts of my life. And so I started reflecting on, okay, why do I believe in this neo-Nazism? Okay, well, because I believe that there's a Jewish conspiracy to destroy the white race. Well, why do I believe that? Okay, well, because skinheads believe that because there's this pamphlet that I read called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. All right, well, let's go and check this thing out. Let's see who wrote it. Let's see if anybody's ever examined it, if there's ever been scientists that have looked at it and try to see if it was real or not. So that's what I did. And began to just realize that my beliefs weren't proportioned to the evidence. That text that I had mentioned, the Protocols of Zion, turned out to be a fraudulent text. So that's what I mean. I was examining things critically, and finding out that I was believing things that weren't logical and that didn't have evidence to support them. So I changed my beliefs, and that's how I got to where I am now.
What did you do after that? After you just suddenly you find yourself in oh my god, I'm an atheist,
Right.
which is an ironic
Well,
way of putting it, but yeah.
I've always been really passionate, no matter what I believe. I've been a passionate person and wanted to share my beliefs. And so when I became an atheist, I got involved with there's Chico Skeptics, my local skeptic community. They didn't have a leader at the time, so I stepped up and I was running Chico Skeptics and just trying to find ways to be an activist or to just step up as a local freethinker and be a leader, and just to see what we needed to do around the community to make it a better community for freethinkers and for everybody alike, but particularly freethinkers. And then that's when I started to think, what can I start on my own? So I remembered reading Boghossian's book, and I tried reaching out to him, and he actually reached back to me, and I started Saved by Reason.
So you want to explain what Saved by Reason is?
Sure, yeah. Well, so I knew I wanted to go into jails and help people. So when I talked to Peter, he said he had to, he was a professor, so he had to show his credentials, and he had to go through all this stuff through social services, which required waiting lists and all kinds of paperwork to go into a jail or any kind of institution like that to teach inmates. And he was like, so just be prepared, man. You're not a professor or anything, so you're gonna have a really hard time getting in. Well, luckily, around this time, the Federal Bureau of Prisons ruled that secular humanism is now recognized as a religion in prisons. And religious ministers are allowed to just without they don't have to be a professor, they don't have to go through social services and fill out a bunch of paperwork and stuff. They're allowed to just show that they're a registered minister, and they're allowed to go into the jail and talk to inmates and do Bible studies or whatever.
So before this, like if you were just a person who wanted to speak with inmates in a non-religious way, you couldn't. You had to be an imam, a pastor, something like that.
Yeah, well, well, the pastors could always go in easily, but if you wanted to teach them something like critical thinking or anything that was educational, you had to go through social services, which is a major headache. Everybody else could go through the religious people, like ministers and stuff, can just go through the religious door, basically.
Wait. So you're telling me, for the most span of history of time in prisons, it was harder to go into a prison and teach critical thinking, but if you wanted to just teach the Bible or the Quran, you could just walk in at any time? That's what you're telling me?
Oh my gosh.
That's exactly what I'm telling you. Yes.
I think it's so obvious. Do I really have to say the problem with that premise right there?
No.
That's
and we wonder why the problem in prisons is so bad.
I mean, it's like if I go to prison, I'm like, I'm not a pastor, I'm an atheist. I want to go in and teach the Socratic method and critical thinking skills to these inmates. They're like, well, yeah, that's kind of really hard.
Yeah.
But if
take a seat.
Take a seat. But if a guy behind me is like, hey, I'm a pastor and I want to teach the Bible, they go walk right in.
Right in.
That is amazing. That's crazy.
But so now I have a way to get right in, just like those guys.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
That secular humanism is recognized.
When did this change?
This changed actually last summer, so summer of 2015.
So that's crazy.
Yeah, Federal Bureau of Prisons. Sorry.
And so then you could get in, and then what did you do? Did you prepare like a system to talk with the inmates and everything?
Yeah, well, Peter basically has a chapter dedicated to this, to how to talk to somebody about the Socratic method. And then he wrote a dissertation on teaching inmates Socratic method, and it's all recorded. So I read, the crap out of that, and right now I'm working on curriculum. But yeah, it's basically just kind of made my own curriculum, and all I do is just talk about the Socratic method. And you can be a Christian, you can be any religion, and come talk to me. And we don't even talk about religion; we just talk about critical thinking.
And do you find there's a lot of people in prisons who want to approach that, who are not religious and looking for?
Oh yes, totally. They're really interested. First, it's just curiosity, and then when they start engaging in the conversation, it gets really interesting, and they get really engaged, and it's fun, and they have fun. So I'm just trying to use that, just the fun aspect of it, this is cool. You can be a better thinker and have fun doing it. So,
That's what I was wondering. The reaction that you were getting from the inmates, because that seems like the best thing to teach them.
Yeah. I mean, so I start out like, what is justice? What do you guys think justice is? And, an inmate will raise his hand and he'll say, I don't know, something like
God's will is justice.
Right. Or justice is standing up for what you believe in. And then, so that'll give me an opportunity to say something funny, like, okay, well, what if you believe something weird, what if like a child molester or something like that? And then the guys, oh yeah, we hate child molesters. No way, that ain't justice, So that gets everybody else all riled up. And so everybody, and other people start chiming in and stuff, well, I think it's this. And so they start trying to find logic, or they start trying to find holes in their own logic. You know what I mean? And it gets really interesting.
Do you teach that? Do you bring up any kind of scientific ideas like evolution and things like that for people? Like what do you go over?
I haven't gotten there yet. I really want to write down curriculum first, because there's a lot of other subjects that have helped me, not just critical thinking. Sam Harris wrote a book about mindful meditation, and having PTSD and all the trauma that I've been through and anxiety that I have, that has helped me, and it's helped me just be more rational thinker and stuff, because I can think in the moment and not be bombarded by all these other thoughts and emotions,
I imagine that's a typical problem for a lot of inmates.
It is. It really is. So I want to incorporate that into my curriculum as well. I want to touch on a lot more subjects than just critical thinking and the Socratic method.
Oh, to also teach them non-religious mindfulness. Seems like a very good thing.
Right.
If we could have
Right.
this nationwide, it'd be really nice.
Wouldn't it? Well, I'm trying to get there. I have people volunteering in other states on the East Coast. So it's not just West Coast. I'm trying to take this nationally. There's some Pastafarian guys that I've been talking to in Texas that are doing this, that are visiting inmates in Texas. So, I'm trying to get this to go nationwide.
So again, you're the president and founder of America's first secular humanist prison outreach organization called Save by Reason.
Mm-hmm. First one. We're kind of on a little bit of a hiatus right now. I'm really trying to get my book done. It's important for me to get that finished. So that's like a priority right now.
What is your book about? Do you want to talk about it a little?
Sure. It's basically it's going to be part memoir, and then I want to take the concepts that I've read about, like I just talked about, the mindful meditation and Socratic method, and then some of the other scientific concepts that are a little more complicated, and break them down so that they're a little more digestible to people that are addicts and people that are in gangs, and just basically the people coming from the backgrounds that I came from. I want to reach those people. So I'm trying to write basically a memoir about my life, and then it's also kind of like a God delusion for addicts kind of thing, you know what I mean, or people in gangs.
That's really good.
So yeah, I think it shouldn't have a hard time getting published. So I think there's a pretty big audience right now for this.
It's
type
hard
of
to
book.
sit down and get books written. I've been trying to write one for a year now, and
Yeah, and I'm a single dad, so it's rough.
oh, I hear you. I have
Yeah.
two teenage kids.
Yeah.
I have no kids, and I'm very happy about that.
Oh, you lucky man. No, it's great. It's great, dude. I love it.
Dude, so Lalo can cut this out. I was going to tell you about the Mormon Church, just how crazy this is.
Sure, yeah.
You want me to cut out what you're about to say?
Well, you don't have to, but you couldn't be a member of the Mormon Church if you were black or had brown skin or anything until 78. We were taught that black people had the mark of Cain. And like my dad drove me into Watts when I was young and I told all of this, that if I married anyone that wasn't white, that was going to be my life. So like, he's like, there's Watts riots and shit, and that anyone that had darker skin was evil and terrible. And I even now, that's what I was asking about, how if there's a part of you that might even you weren't. I mean, you were kind of raised with it, but not like I was raised with it. With the religion telling me that, well, the religion told me that the more pious and the better Mormon you were, your skin would literally change and you would become more white. So,
that's a trip, dude.
Right? And it used to be in the Book of Mormon, but they took it out. They take things out over time. So, I think in like 1990 they took it out.
Wow, that late?
Yeah, like it's crazy.
That's insane.
Like, I married an Indian Pakistani guy, and my family, aside from leaving the Mormon Church, my family disowned me for marrying someone that wasn't white. So it was just like, but I still find myself when a person of darker skin, sometimes I will start to like lock my doors and then stop. Just like, what am I doing? It's something innate. I don't know how to stop it, but I do immediately. But just like for just a split second, it's there, and and it disgusts me. I find it shameful, and I get disgusted with myself. Same way I thought about Jews and gays. I tell this to everybody, but I wish death on to my gay brother, because that was the way it was with Islam. The whole thing about surrounding yourself with the like-minded people, and the way I thought about certain types of people, and just thinking that people should die. But it's I don't know if there's a lot of like Samoans and stuff in the Mormon Church, but I don't know if people are aware of how racist Mormons are.
I don't think people consider it like a white supremacist kind of religion, but still kind of is, and it sounds like it was very much like that up until recently, right, Jen?
We would like I'm very, very white, but we would like our friends because they had like the Native American, the Indian placement program where they would take young kids out of their homes and place them with Mormon families. And they would tell these kids if they were pious and good, their skin, I mean, literally would whiten. So if you guys are just really good, you'll have white skin and that, you know, you'll be white and delightsome. The literal words they would tell them, white and delightsome.
Wow.
It's just it's crazy. You know, white was better. And I always thought, you know, white was better. So this whole thing lately about being called a race traitor and stuff, I just think it's interesting.
Is there any specific belief you look back on, Joshua, and you think like that is the craziest thing I believed back then?
Oh man, there's a lot.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
But no, I think the craziest one really is just believing, and most skinheads that I know believe that they accept evolution, but they believe that's how the other races got here. And I really believe that we either evolved from some like fish type of creature, or we came from an alien race.
You mean white people?
Whites. Yeah, I thought white people came from either evolved from fish and came from the water instead of apes, or they came from aliens or something, and were therefore completely separate than humans.
Wait, they evolved differently
than other races.
So
yeah.
so they believe in evolution for other races, that they evolved from apes, but white people specifically evolved either from differently or from aliens?
Either on another planet or maybe from the sea or something. We came from another animal.
Well, that's different.
Yeah, they don't believe we evolved from apes. They believe that other races did, and that's why they're more lowly than the Aryan race, basically.
Did they ever show you any proof or any kind of to back that stuff up? Did you ever question it?
I remember reading like a pamphlet that they had put out, like Aryan Nations had put out or something, and it was I don't remember specifically what they were saying. I think it was about a comet that hit the Earth, and it somehow had evidence that there was life here before it had evolved from apes. So I think, yeah, that was probably it.
Jen, you want to ask something?
Oh, I was going to ask, was there any part of you that was like, this isn't right, so you would think that you needed to find out, you would want to study it more? Like
yeah, but I just didn't at the time. I was in prison, so I didn't have access to a whole lot. So I just had access to neo-Nazi stuff, you know. So it was all just dogma, basically.
And the prison, like the people that run the prisons, know this is going on, and they don't do anything about it.
No, I mean that would be, you know, taking away amendments. So I mean, you can't. I mean,
that makes sense.
Yeah, people have freedoms, so.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it might be horrible beliefs, but it's their beliefs, so people have the freedom to those beliefs, right?
Right.
Yeah, but the whole thing with you bringing secular ideas into the prison, I think that's the radical change there, right? Because it's one thing to say like, okay, people have freedom of belief in prisons, but when you're limiting the people coming in who are bringing in new ideas, right. Or reinforcing ideas, and you're saying it's only can be like religious people can go in, and if you're just bringing science and skepticism and critical thinking, it's like, oh, you know, you can't come in. That then it's not a really fair playing field of ideas, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember being, when I was in prison, looking for groups, trying to see if there was groups, and there was nothing but religious groups. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I could go to church and that was it. So I know that there's people in there that are looking for stuff and that want to change, you know, that want to better themselves. There's just no access for them. There's no tools for them. So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do is provide one.
In the U.S. right now, like, race is such a big thing, and there's so much arguments about how to deal with racism and things like that. You having been in that mentality, what would you recommend is the best way to get people out of that way of thinking?
Out of racism?
Yeah, I mean, out of you know, when you find yourself against like an actual white supremacist, mm-hmm. and you can, and let's say you actually have the moment where you can sit down and have a conversation with them and present them with ideas. What do you think, having you been in that mentality. What is the best approach to it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I know.
I guess for me is present. I mean, in my experience, most people are pretty logical thinkers, even if they have really illogical beliefs. Those beliefs were probably pounded into them as children, and not a lot of people really reflect on their beliefs. I mean, even secularists that are born and raised in a secular home, they don't really reflect on their beliefs to see if is this something I really believe. We're not taught to do that, so it's not something we typically do. So I believe that people are most people for the most part are really logical people. So I would approach it with the evidence and say, look, is this logical? Is this belief logical? And let's look at the evidence. Let's look at some of the evidence to that shows that maybe it's not. And I think I would approach it that way. And then I guess just empathy is really a big one. Just telling people to have empathy and to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I don't know. What about you, Jen? What do you think would be a good way to approach that conversation?
I think what you said.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole lot of anger, and when there's anger, there's not a chance for discourse. And I hear a lot of talking points and a lot of I think people just shut down and they don't want to listen. And I think if you react in the same way, that's my big problem, because I get defensive because I've been there, and it bothers me. And it bothers me more now because I have mixed race kids, so I feel I'm emotionally invested in it. So knowing that I was that way and that I didn't have to stay that way, so I was able to grow and have empathy and humanity. I think it bothers me that a little bit more, so I get just a tiny bit more defensive. But I don't think that helps. I think I really think that coming at it the way you said is the best way. I wouldn't know any other way to come at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, neither would I. And like I said, logic is kind of a language that everybody understands. And so if you come at it that way and go, look, man, I'm just looking for the truth, and I'm not saying this is really how it is, but I mean, look at the evidence, and once they see it themselves, and then it's going to be pretty hard to argue with the facts.
Doesn't mean I'm always good at it, or that they're always going to listen.
But the problem there is so some of these topics are so nuanced that it's really hard to not get your emotions flared up when you're talking about these things, because they're not things you can just talk about in 5 minutes. You really got to delve deep into some really deep topics and go into some pretty deep rabbit holes, and discuss the history and the philosophy and all that behind certain cultures, and there's just a lot of nuance to these things. So open
minds. If you could do it with an open mind and
definitely
be willing to admit that you're wrong, I say it all the time, like I would still be Muslim or Mormon or be a member of another cult if I wasn't able to be wrong or have an open mind. So and even now when I'm discussing things to do with Islam or anything really, I have to be willing to accept that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to call myself a skeptic or even, an advocate for, equal rights.
I think one of the problems I see with the approach that currently in the U.S., people on the left who are, quote unquote, trying to fight racism are getting wrong is that they're focusing on the color of skin of the people that they see as opponents. So they see their opponents as like white supremacists, and they focus on the
identity politics.
Yeah, they focus on the whiteness, and I really fervently reject these actions that are taken in universities or social groups where they purposely exclude people not for their ideas but for their skin color. So they'll have like some meeting, or they'll have some student group or something like that, or a class or excursions, and they'll say, we don't want white people there, we only want people of color there.
Or the ads for jobs even.
That's
crazy. Ads for
crazy.
jobs. And I there's stories of like of students, like a few black students asking for student dorm room only with other roommates that are people of color. They don't want white kids in there, and they say they want a safe space free of microaggressions and things like that.
That's why when you introduced me, I really wanted you to introduce me as a classical liberal and not just a liberal. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, it's a trend that we're seeing all over the place, and it really reminds me of the neo-Nazis and just the way that they're shutting down free speech, and just because it contradicts their ideology or it makes them uncomfortable, so they have these trigger warnings or safe zones or whatever.
Do you also see some similarities there in kind of that we are better off being around our own based on skin color?
Exactly. It's exactly what it's the same thing that I saw and the skinhead circles is, let's separate because we're more comfortable with our own kind of thing.
And then if you're white, you're automatically racist. The reverse racism doesn't exist. Like, what?
Yeah.
Well, I don't like that term, reverse racism. I think it's just racism.
Well, yeah, it's the whole thing is ridiculous.
I mean, also, I see multiple problems when they do that. One, I think it's just flat out racism, because you're excluding people in a group not for what their beliefs are or their ideas. They could say, hey, maybe we don't want a skinhead or a neo-Nazi or something like that like here today, if we, they don't want like half the group to be like aggressive in racial beliefs. That's one thing. But then when you differentiate people based on their beliefs, that's there's clear disagreement no matter what their skin color is there. But when they say like we want people of color and we don't want white people here, well, to me they're saying like we want people of a certain skin color, and it doesn't matter what you believe. We could all disagree, you could have horrible beliefs, but we want people of this skin color, and we don't care how liberal you are or how nice you are or how not racist you are, and you're white. We just don't want white people. And that's me. I don't see anything liberal about that at all. I mean, it would never occur to me to do any kind of group or organize anything at all. It doesn't matter really what, or if it was a professional thing or a social thing, and to differentiate people based on their skin color. It just never would occur to me. And these people are painting it as like this is the new kind of liberalism, which I don't think it is. And another problem they add when they do that is, one, they're being racist, and the two, they're kind of instigating and validating those extremist, white supremacists or any kind of white racists on the other side, right? Because they can then say, see, you white kids, don't you see how they're separating you? Don't you see how they're belittling you and discriminating against you? Do you see how it's leaning towards favoritism towards the people of color? And and when the universities and administration do that, they validate those ideas.
That is so true. Yeah.
And I bet you the groups that you would have moved in at that time would take those stories and see how what the people of color are doing against you. And that's, I think they're doing their work for them when they do that. And those situations should be squashed immediately. They should tell those students to me, like if there's Chilean students like me, for example, they and a bunch of Chileans are saying, we don't want white people here. This university say, look, if you don't want to be around white people, that's your thing. You can't ask the university to administrate that in any kind of way. You can't be a group under the university, the official group of the university. There can't be a class. There can't be an excursion. There can't be anything where you're excluding skin color or race or nationality or gender or sexuality. You want to do that, you can do it in private. You can't do it under our name.
Isn't it illegal to do that?
I mean, the problem I see is that I think technically it's illegal in general, but the only time the laws are applied is when it's done by white people, right? And because they're not going to kind of apply laws against non-white people, like if they're black or if they're gay or anything like that, because then the university, if they say you can't do that, well, then the university is called racist, and you're not giving us a safe space, and and this is microaggressions, and et cetera, et cetera. So they flip it on its head, right? They flip it on the head where the person being racist is saying, no, you're being racist by not allowing me to separate myself from white people, right? And I think that's a very dangerous road that basically liberal institutions are going down.
I don't see how they can condone it at all.
I think people are just scared at this point. I think if you're a university teacher or administrator,
Yeah.
you know, there's so much, like, because that's why it's called social justice, right? Like, there are basically kids online with Tumblrs and Twitters and Facebooks, and if you know, a student in a university can post something on Facebook or Twitter, and if it gets 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 shares, it doesn't matter if the people who shared that were 14-year-old whatevers who don't know a thing about a thing. Salon, Upworthy, you know, MTV, whatever. They'll do a video. They'll do an article where they'll say, "Hey, this went viral. Look at this. This 14-year-old girl, this 18-year-old girl, this 21-year-old, you know, gay black girl in a university called her professor racist for saying etc. or doing this," right? Doesn't matter what was said, doesn't matter what really happened. It got too many shares. The school is scared of the bad publicity, and they'll fire the administrator or the teacher. And that's what they call social justice these days, right? The justice of the majority. And that's a very dangerous way to be running institutions of education. So I don't really like that whole deal at all. I don't like what's happening with education.
It's leading us towards Orwell's 1984.
Yeah,
with the thought police and everything.
Yeah. And 14-year-olds dictating what, you know, a professor with a PhD might be teaching at Yale or Berkeley. Right?
That's insane.
So I wanted to ask you, Josh, before we ended it, with the whole thing with elections coming up and Donald Trump, and I think it was David Duke who said that who endorsed Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Do you see Donald Trump actually being a voice of kind of that white supremacists or neo-Nazis would actually be sympathetic to? Or do you think, despite all the crazy things he says, all his misogyny, they would reject him? Is there actually validity to the accusation that they would sympathize with his points of view?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about his views do you think that they sympathize with?
Well, I mean, just everything, all his talking points, everything that he says it's like right out of the playbook of, you know, right wing or, you know, far right conservative ideology talking points. You know, he talks about migration and building a wall. Man, that's something that skinheads have been talking about, you know, since skinheads have been around, is having this country back and building a wall around it and keeping everybody else out. So, you know, whether Donald Trump himself personally is a white supremacist and, you know, reads Mein Kampf and, you know, likes Hitler, I seriously doubt those things.
Yeah, I doubt that's the reasons he's saying those things either.
Right.
It's highly unlikely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's just saying those things to become president, most likely. But, yeah, I mean, he is definitely somebody that they can endorse because he's saying the things that they want to hear. It's interesting and it's scary. You know, when I was a skinhead at the time, we had Barack Obama was running, and you know, he was just coming out and announcing that he was going to win, and you know, I remember the skinheads just thinking that was never going to happen, and if it did, it was going to be the most terrible thing that could happen to America. So I'm really not surprised that that Trump's success is so just fast moving and just, you know, it's just like a caught catching like wildfire because, you know, we had a black president and it's fueled the fire for these guys for 8 years now. So, you know, they've recruited a lot of people and, you know, they've used Obama's presidency as an excuse. And, you know, the fact that the Republicans have been focusing so much on Obama's failures and saying that he's, you know, a Muslim and he's trying to destroy America, that's only been fueling the fire for neo-Nazis and you know, white supremacists and racists in the country for 8 years. And now they have a guy that's up there, you know, saying all the things that they've been wanting to hear from a leader. So it's scary, man, and it's just it's really not a surprise, honestly. Can we talk about that a little bit? Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, what is your opinion on Black Lives Matter?
Well, I mean, this is interesting because there is a problem with police shooting unarmed people, but in my experience, it's not just black people. And I understand that there is institutional racism and that, we still have issues with racism in the country. But shouldn't the focus be on everybody that's being shot by the police? I mean, I just had a personal friend of mine, Andrew Thomas, last Thanksgiving was driving home. He was drunk driving, and a cop was following him, and he flipped his car before the cop was able to hit a siren or anything. My buddy flipped his car, and his girlfriend that was in the car flew out of the front windshield. And so my buddy's first instinct was to get out of the car. So he pops his head up out of the car to get on it because it's flipped over on its side, and he's trying to get out. And the cop just walks right up, points his gun at him, and this was on CNN, and I think even TYT did a show, a thing on it. But and the cop pulls the gun out and just shoots my buddy in the neck, puts his gun back, and my buddy falls back into the car. And the cop just starts looking for the casing to his shell for like 11 minutes, and this is all on camera on a dash cam. The police come, the other cops show up. He doesn't say anything about shooting the guy. My friend tells the other cops, I've been shot, I can't get out, because they're telling him to get out of the car. He's like, I've been shot, I can't get out. And the other cop's like, no, I didn't shoot him, he's lying. And so they're saying, get out of the car, get out of the car. And he's still looking for the bullet. And not until the paramedics pulled him out of the car and saw the bullet in his neck about 15 minutes later, he said, oh, yeah, my gun might have went off. So the DA was going to let this go. He said it was an accidental shooting. So I organized a protest. We had about 100 people, 150 people show up from my town. We did it right where the accident happened, which happened to be right across from the police station. So it was all over local news and stuff. And we lasted for about a month until finally Andrew died in the hospital. And
how long ago was this?
This was last November and December. Mm-hmm. He was shot in November, died in December, and we protested through December and January.
Why did the police officer shoot him?
Well, during the trial, he claimed he didn't even know he shot him. He claimed he doesn't even remember shooting him. He says I think he says he brought out his gun because it had a flashlight on it. So he was using the flashlight on the gun. I just know that he said during the trial he didn't even remember shooting him. So I can't speculate as to why he shot him.
All right.
But he was charged with involuntary manslaughter and fired. So we stopped protesting, and the trial went through, and he was just charged, or found guilty. Excuse me, he was found guilty by the jury. So that's great. It's that we've got some justice. But my point in sharing the story is that this is happening everywhere, and it's happening to everybody. It's not just happening to black people. I know it's happening to black people more than it is to white people, even though there are more white people shot a year than there are black people. If you take into account, that the population of blacks to whites is lower than it is more blacks are being shot per year.
So proportionately,
right?
More, yeah.
Proportionately, yeah, right. But blacks are also committing more crimes. So. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot more nuance to this than just, it being about blacks being shot by white cops.
I also think one of the problems I see with Black Lives Matter is the fact that it's just a hashtag on Twitter.
Right.
And multiple organizations can open up under that hashtag, under that name, right? So any people can show up at a protest or at a rally or organize something going on, and not just in the United States, but now all over the world. And they're wearing T-shirts or signs that says Black Lives Matter, and people accept that they're representatives of that movement. And that didn't used to be that way. It used to be that an organization would open up with certain heads of that organization with a mission statement, with certain priorities and certain objectives, and they would organize a protest or a rally or a meeting somewhere with those heads, with a certain agenda, with certain objectives, and then they would go out and protest. But here, you could find very easily two people who are Black Lives Matter supporters on Twitter, or even run organizations themselves with members, and they don't agree on anything.
So does Black Lives Matter, do they have like a structure? Do they have a board? Do they have a leader?
Well, there are many, but here's the thing. Like I think it actually started with three girls who I don't remember the name who started the hashtag, but it just branched out into anything it wanted anyone to be.
That's what I assumed.
Right. And I think that's
right.
a very bad thing right now, is
It
that
is.
people can take just a hashtag and it can just be thrown around as just anything, and anybody can represent it. 20 years ago, that wasn't happening. And so I see a lack of structure there, where anybody who's like 14 or 15 can go on Twitter, have hashtag Black Lives Matter and say anything. And then that could be screen captured and quoted in an article and say, oh, see how Black Lives Matter thinks. Right. And then another person will say, take another account that sounds much more rational and say, no, this is Black Lives Matter. So anybody is Black Lives Matter. No, nobody do you guys know the name of one representative of Black Lives Matter officially? Could you name one?
DeRay.
Is he a representative?
I don't know.
Is he
the
a
only person I know?
DeRay McKenzie or something? His name is
That's the
So
only
he's
name I know.
popular, but is his word taken as the official word for Black Lives Matter?
No, I don't think they have an official.
What about Coates? What about Coates?
Is his word taken as
No.
I don't think so, right?
I don't
Right.
think so, but that was the only one I can think of.
Right. So I don't even think most people can name a representative, right? Not and even if you name somebody who's kind of well known, like DeRay McKenzie, is like, is he a representative of that movement, where he's just like, people can say, quote him and say, this is what Black Lives Matter thinks? Well, no, he just kind of represents himself, right?
Then that's their biggest problem, is that they don't have structure. Like they're just a hashtag, like you said.
Yeah, that I see as one of the big problems of these movements, that now we have like hashtag movements where it's just anything goes and anything said is represented. I mean, anytime I see like a rally and there's some people with Black Lives Matter t-shirts, people say, see, look what Black Lives Matter is doing. Do they represent Black Lives Matter? Kind of yes, kind of no, right? It's just like I don't know, It's
As
like
long as they're black,
right?
Yeah, they're black, so.
Right? They represent
Busted.
maybe some people, not everyone.
That's what I mean. Like that's what I meant by what I said. Is like that's what it seems to me right now. Is if you're black, then you can have a voice in the BLM movement. But if you're not black, you don't have a voice, and you don't even get to have a part in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's I think that's a problem, definitely. They need structure, and then they need to be a part of the national conversation by letting other people get into the conversation, and not just limiting the conversation to the color of your to the color of your skin. But well, I could talk to you guys forever.
Yeah, definitely.
I love your show, Lalo. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you, Joshua Turner, for being on. Do you want to mention your websites or anything where people can find you?
People can find me on Twitter. I'm at Saved by Reason on Twitter, or Facebook, Saved by Reason. Our website is down and getting worked on right now. But you can, if you're listening to this, it might be up right now. So www.savedbyreason.org is our website. But yeah, right now you can get a hold of me on Twitter at Saved by Reason. And just trying to get this book done and get it out there. And until then, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing with Saved by Reason. And we could appreciate any support anybody can lend us.
Well, thank you, Joshua, for being on. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Oh, it was lots of fun. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks again.
Right on.